Netflix is expected to raise their prices in 2024. Not quite the same level of tragedy, but not very good to hear either. This is per UBS Securities. They're like an analyst group or whatever. I'm not really super familiar with UBS, but I know that they make kind of these projections. And Variety notes that by raising their prices, this should accelerate revenue and earnings growth, right? It is there's a projected revenue growth of about 15% for 2024. This is compared to 7% growth. 7% growth in 2023. And they're estimated to reach about 20 million net subscribers. And this would be up from 18 million in 2023. So net subscribers, as you know, they might get 40 million new subscribers, but they might lose 20. So then the net subscribers is now 20, right? So, I'm trying to take a look at here. So the reason why this is important is, again, as streaming is in this weird flux. I talked about this last week. While streaming is in this weird flux, everyone is trying new strategies and methods, and one of those methods is because for the longest time, streaming as a business was not profitable. It was losing money. But like a lot of things on Wall Street, especially like in the tech world, it's the promise of potential profits. So even though Netflix was losing money year over year, it was just getting so much investment, so much capital being put into it. And then I think it was 2022 where they kind of stumbled. And for the first time in their history, they actually lost subscribers. They had a net loss or whatever it was. And that sent the whole industry into a frenzy. Netflix's stock tanked. All the other studios who had now just created their streaming services are like, holy shit, like, what are we going to do? Like, maybe this isn't profitable? So they're moving, basically the goal for the longest time for streaming services was growth. Now it's about profitability, about actually just maximizing every penny that we put into this. So this is why this is important, that, Netflix is going to raise its prices because it needs to continue to find ways to make its money. It can't rely on just okay, we lost a shit ton of money, but look how big we've grown. Look at the growth over this quarter. That's not going to fly anymore, at least with investors, right? Let's see here. Per Nielsen, so Nielsen is a company that for decades has done they track how many people are watching a television program, and now in the streaming era they kind of have crossed over into that as well. Per Nielsen, Netflix's TV market share rose very slightly, but still rose. From 7.7% in December to 7.9% in January. And UBS, this UBS Securities, the ones who are making these projections and predictions, they're kind of identifying that, the whole industry is shifting, and Netflix stands to benefit greatly from this shifting. So here we have a quote from UBS saying, quote, "The new playbook for studios, not Netflix, but Disney and Universal and Warner Brothers, all these places that formed their own streaming services, right? UBS says, quote, "The new playbook includes 1, price increases, 2, platform consolidation, 3, library curation, 4, cuts to content spending, and 5, a renewed focus on content licensing," end quote. They would then continued on saying, quote, "As the objective in streaming shifts," and this is really important, okay? "As the objective in streaming shifts from subscriber growth to profitability for the traditional media companies, we see Netflix as the ultimate beneficiary of this industry rationalization," end quote, right? So you have places like Disney and Warner Brothers and Universal going, okay, it's not profitable for us to hoard this IP, right? Because pre-Disney Plus and HBO Max, all this stuff, it depended on the contracts and the agreements made, but theoretically, you could go on Netflix and watch a Star Wars movie or a Batman movie or whatever the movie might be. And then they looked at Netflix and their eyes got really wide and went, why are we doing this? We got to make all this money. So they all create their own little walled off little content gardens. But then they realized there's the streaming model is not profitable. At least the way they were doing it, right? Maybe there's a way you could do it and make it profitable. Netflix is clearly doing that, but or at least trying to, right? So they're like, shit. Why? Back in the day, we licensed all of this shit. And yeah, Netflix was growing a lot and potentially threatening, our business, but we were still getting a kickback from their growth, rising tides lift all ships kind of thing. We need to go back to that a little bit. We'll still keep our own Disney Plus and HBO Max and Peacock and whatever it is. But we'll also we'll start licensing some of this stuff back out. So now you're seeing some of these movies that for the past couple of years, since the dawn of the studio-owned streaming service, you're seeing this content that had been walled off for a few years now. They're showing up on Netflix again. They're showing up on Amazon Prime again, or Hulu even, right? So, it's Netflix stands to benefit from the studios realizing we can't hoard this content. We need to license it out. And who's going to be there to license it? A third party like Netflix. Netflix obviously has been very successful in creating its own original content, but, its original, the thing that helped create it was that licensing, that idea that you get all this different kind of content and from all these different places in one convenient package for a fairly low monthly price, right? And part of me is like, I don't know if this is going to work. This might alienate people, but Netflix has proven me wrong over the past year and a half. All of their strategies that I said would fall on their face have been successful, right? So the price hikes, clearly, they're still having good subscriber growth despite raising the prices. They've already done a price hike a few months ago back in October. The basic plan being raised from $9.99 to $11.99. And with all this being said, though, the average prices of all the different tiers are still lower than the competition. Again, because they have been in the game longer, they're willing to take a little bit more of a loss, whereas these studios got into the streaming business for very short-term greedy reasons, so they're gonna make their services way more expensive than something like Netflix. And something else that has helped Netflix is the password sharing thing, right? So for the longest time, Netflix claimed, we got to figure out this password sharing thing. People who, families or even if they're sharing with their friends, you have, potentially 3 or 4 different subscriptions, but everyone's using just one, right? So they finally started cracking down on passwords. They've been talking about it for years. It used to be part of their advertising, like share your password with friends and family. And then they were like, shit, we're losing a bunch of money doing that. So they started cracking down on the password sharing and started basically a page sharing program where it was like, okay, you can share your password, but you gotta pay extra to allow it on more devices, right? And that'll be cheaper than someone else getting a new subscription necessarily. So I'm not sure how long of this period this is, but I have a stat here that about 30% of new signups have been from the paid sharing program. And I think that's even, it's something that, again, has been very surprising. And it's been another source of revenue that people are like, okay, I'll pay an extra couple bucks, or however much it is to keep the status quo of I've shared it with, if you're a parent and then you have kids growing up, if it's like my parents, they're like, okay, we have 2 adult children in 2 different places. Maybe you're sharing it with friends, like good friends, or like an old, lover perhaps, and you haven't gotten the thing and you want them to still be able to watch Netflix or whatever. This has been very lucrative, right? And we have a quote here from Netflix co-CEO Greg Peters saying, quote, "We largely put price increases on hold while we were rolling out the paid sharing work because we saw that as a form of substitute price increase," quote, end quote. Yeah, so they've been holding off on raising prices again because they were like, let's do this, let's crack down on the password sharing, let's convert some of these into additional, paying for access to have the Netflix on multiple devices or more devices, and then once that kind of stagnates, then we'll raise the price again. And then also they have their ad tier, which again I thought was ludicrous, but has proven very successful for all of the streaming services, and it seems like consumers like it. They like the option of they don't see it as paying for the same thing but worse, and now they have to pay extra for something, which is like what Amazon Prime was doing. If you want to actually watch one of my older videos, I talk about it. It seems like consumers really see it as like, okay, the basic plan's the basic plan, but I'm willing to suffer through ads, but then the trade-off is that it'll be cheaper for me. That has proven it's been proven very successful for both consumers and the services. So, I think the larger kind of question here, and again, I don't necessarily have an answer to this, is what does this all say about the health of streaming, right? Again, what is streaming going to look like 10, 5, even just 2 years from now? That all remains to be seen. But clearly, Netflix is leaning in on, again, squeezing every penny out of its subscribers to make it, to make it a little bit more profitable. We have a comment here from JJ because I'm as shocked as you because when I lost my Netflix account due to the password sharing measure, I just shrugged. What reason is there to go back? Thank you for bringing that up because I forgot to bring that up, right? I felt like this was going to fail because Netflix had really ruined its brand for years of just shitty offerings. Like for every one really good original movie or show, there was like 20 mediocre or awful movies or shows. And I think people really, especially as things started to get walled off into these little content gardens, I think the value proposition of Netflix shrunk every day, right? But it worked. I don't know if it's complacency. Maybe it's like these large libraries of content, both original to Netflix as well as just like that legacy. Like, again, I don't think it's still on there, but think about like the success of The Office being on Netflix. That was like a huge part of its success. Think like Breaking Bad, right? Like these shows where that Netflix was like your one place to watch this on streaming, right? So I'm shocked that they've proven me wrong every single time. So, it remains to be seen what happens next.